Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of The Other Side. I am joined today by everybody's favorite bard, Usubeni Yume. Insert sound effect here. Introduce yourself, Yume.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, Sugar. It's nice to be on this talk show. I really appreciate you inviting me. I'm so excited to give you a little bit more insight into Lucy today.
Oh, I just realized. There we are. Forgot to make my model transparent again. There we are. So, this is our campaign talk show where we will be discussing our weekly D&D game, Ioruvian Knights. We're starting with Yume, who portrays Lucy the Bard. So we'll just be asking Yume a couple questions about Lucy and how his in-game decisions have been molded by how he created Lucy, and also by just things in the moment, as well as stuff around character creation. So, let's start him off easy with Yume. What is your experiences
Yes.
with Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, so to be honest, this is actually my first ever Dungeons and Dragons game. So I've never played any type of like tabletop game before. I've always seen them. Like I watched a little bit of Critical Role. I watched a little bit of Cyberpunk. But never before had I played Dungeons and Dragons before VTT. So it was really interesting getting into it, and I wanted to make sure that before that first stream, I researched as much as I could, just so that I wouldn't be in over my head.
Yeah, I find that just crazy, the fact that this game was your first game of D&D, because you just seemed like such a natural when we first started playing. In that first session, we were all super blown away, and me knowing that obviously this was your first game of D&D, like that just hit home even harder, that we had something special with you when we brought you on.
Yeah, why? Thank you. Was it the first scene where I kicked open the door, did a
Yeah.
little dance, and and used the minor illusion to make that L?
I think that you definitely came into the stream with a bang. Uh, you definitely kind of, you rocked up, you kicked down that metaphorical and actual door, and you said, "I'm here. Look at me." And we were all kind of like, "Yeah, okay, he's here. We he's definitely here."
Mhm. Yeah, Lucy is definitely that type of character, especially when he was carving the L's into the foreheads of all his fallen enemies. He's definitely that type of character.
He definitely feels like that kind of character. He's got definitely a certain kind of charm to him.
And I also think that Astrid captured like his personality really well in that artwork.
Mm,
I can just feel the cockiness and all the badassness behind that.
definitely. I especially his character. What's the word? His character demeanor, and how he was kind of dressed compared to the rest of the cast. Because some of the rest of the cast, we've got two pirates, a
Mm-hmm.
farmer boy from up north, and uh, probably the other most oddly, not oddly dressed, but definitely out there dressed, for her character type, which was obviously Aoife in her, goblin in her little robes. But you definitely with the whole, I want to say gunslinger esque kind of attire,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
gives me
Yeah.
really Western vibes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And he's definitely got a lot of character to him, especially with like the huge belt buckle, which says free on it. He wears these big black boots. He's got like a prosthetic hand that has the word love engraved onto it. Yeah, he's definitely not your average type of person. He
He,
definitely likes to show off.
he's definitely not your average Joe in this kind of scenario.
Mhm.
Um, so, leading into the next question, knowing that you haven't really played much D&D, but kind of getting a obviously getting a feel for the genre and whatnot. Is this a character archetype you think you would normally play, or is it something a little bit more out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, Lucy is very much my D&D counterpart. So like Lucy, I also write poetry, and like Lucy, I might have a little bit too much self-confidence at times. So the character, um, I wouldn't really say I play it. I just kind of, it's just kind of me on screen. So Lucy isn't really much of a stretch for me. Um, Basically, whatever I do is whatever he'd do, and I think that's why I can probably play him so naturally.
That's always good. Most of the characters I play usually have a little bit of me inside them. And I think that's the most effective way to roleplay a character, is to kind of take a little bit of yourself and put it into other characters. Most of the characters I play are old men with traumatic backstories.
Wait, you're an old man? You're gonna lose all your young girl viewers.
Well, I definitely feel like an old man at times. But yeah, that's awesome that, you know, I feel like a trap some people fall into, especially when they first play D&D, is creating a character which doesn't have that little bit of them inside it. They create a character that, oh, this is a cool concept, but they have no real connection to that character. And that's where I feel like a lot of new players kind of fall into this hole of playing a character that's kind of, you know, either a bit of a dick or just a bit one-dimensional. Because they don't have that little bit of themselves inside kind of driving the character forwards.
Yeah, that was a really big part of when I was making him too, because being my first D&D game, I just wanted to make sure that I had like this interesting character with a lot of different aspects of his personality, just so I can have a lot of things to build on, and I'd also have like some real life inspiration on how I'd react to certain things. So I think that's probably what gives him a lot of personality, even though like he is kind of one-dimensional in terms of his thinking. But there's deeper parts to him, which we'll find out as we go along and play.
Yeah, I think out of all the characters so far, the one that has been filled with the most surprises has been Lucy. I just feel like every time something happens, he just comes out of left field and just slaps something else. Like inviting a surfer dragonborn on their adventure.
Yeah, and taking people to the slums to hand out some goods.
Exactly, just all these surprises. I'm just like, you're just like, I want to head to the slums. I'm like, oh shit, now I have to make up the Pegoport slums, which I hadn't really thought about before that. But
well, at least I'm challenging you as a DM as well. We both get to grow together.
That's the perfect what's the word? That is perfect for me as a DM. I want to be challenged. I want people to throw stuff at me that I'm not expecting. Obviously not too much. There's only so much I can do. But that's part of the reason I don't really prep. Is I'm waiting for players like you to throw me a curveball. I only look so far ahead into the future because I know that there are lots of twists and turns on that path that could come at any moment. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Since obviously Lucy is your first character, and obviously diving straight into Bard, which is one of the more interesting character archetypes in D&D. Obviously, you're dipping into fighter moving forward. But which of the other kind of character archetypes within Dungeons and Dragons is attractive to you?
Okay. Yeah, so I remember when I was fairly young, the ones who would always catch my eye were like the edge boys, basically. So like the ones who lost their family members when they were small, the ones who don't really talk, the ones who keep to themselves. And I guess the reason they kind of meshed with me was because I was kind of the same when I was young. I like to keep to myself. I moved around a lot, so never really had any like long-term friends. But I think that's also kind of like what transformed me into the person I am today and the Lucy I am today. Just because instead of hanging out with people, I ended up writing poetry. I ended up doing all these different things, and then eventually I just kind of grew into it. I grew into my voice. Um,
A beautiful voice at that.
yeah, so I grew into that. I got more self confidence in myself, and I just became self confident, not overly confident, I would say, maybe sometimes. But yeah, I just kind of grew into that. And then that's when I started liking characters that were more based on like freedom. They had really strong ideals and values. They were strong enough to, stand up for what they believe in, no matter what other people say. So that's really how I transformed into the Edge Boy, into the I don't know if I call him a hero, but more like an anti-hero. That's probably how I'd say it.
Look, I think Lucy's a very multi-dimensional character. He's got a lot of angles that he's kind of working, and that kind of have created him up to this point. So I feel like what you described there is basically the antithesis of the bard. That's exactly what being a bard is. It's standing up for what you believe in. It's what's the word? It's being loud and being proud, which is definitely two words that describe Lucy.
Are you saying bars aren't just supposed to be horny? I thought that was
They
the
can be
whole
both.
point.
They can be both.
Yeah, that's like the meme I see every time I hear about bards, is that they're just horny
Well,
and they seduce dragons.
hey, we'll get to that a bit later on. And I guess kind of hopping on that idea, what were your inspirations when you created Lucy? Like characters or ideas? What directed you towards what eventually became Lucy?
Yeah, so when I was thinking of Lucy, I really love having like duality in characters because I feel like it gives them a whole nother layer of just character in general. So I have a lot of different influences. I'll start with the more real life ones. So he has a tattoo of a white snake around his arm, and the snake has a lot of different symbolisms. In Norse mythology, the snake can represent Jormungandr, and that's the snake that signals like Ragnarok, which is the end of the gods. So I like that he can symbolize like the end of some great beings. In some cultures, the snake also represents like life and immortality, and I feel like that's kind of a little bit of what Lucy's going for as well. He wants to be a legend that goes beyond his own times, especially with his message. And in other cultures, the snake can represent evil. So I think that having those different aspects is something that Lucy likes, and he doesn't want to be like chained down, and he doesn't want to be labeled in a specific way. He just wants to be basically larger than life.
I see.
So yeah. So the snake is one thing, and then another thing that was a big influence was Johnny Silverhand.
Ah, yeah.
And yes, wake the fuck up, samurai. Yeah, yeah. So he was definitely a big influence as well. Like me personally, I used to be a rocker boy when I was younger too. I played the guitar and drums. So Johnny Silverhand was another one of those characters who really influenced me, and definitely influenced the creation of Lucy. Because like Johnny Silverhand, Lucy was a soldier, and then he ended up going through some stuff, giving away his freedom when he was young, not really knowing what it meant, and then kind of realized that he gave up that freedom a little too late, and by then it was he had already been damaged, and so he did some soul searching, and here's where he ended up, and now he's ready to kick ass. He's ready to save some life, but also deal some death.
Nice. I kind of like the idea of like duality, because obviously bards are one of the few classes within D&D that can heal, and while they're more of a sort of support class built around
Mm.
supporting the other characters in the party rather than being a straight up healer, there's some. I feel like him being a valor bard and being more both in tune with, you know, warfare and swordsmanship as well as healing kind of signals that duality of him, you know, healing with one hand and dealing damage with the other. I really like that idea.
Yeah, it definitely carries over into a lot of like when I was designing him, a lot of those choices. Because like I mentioned, he has a prosthetic hand, which has the word love engraved onto it. So my idea was like with that same hand, you know, he'll make love to, you know, those he fancies, but he'll also deal out some iron-fisted love to those who he feels deserves it. So there's a lot of duality in his design.
I love that. So, going into a little bit of a more into some of the more harder questions, or not necessarily harder, but more related to within the game and how Lucy's feeling. What are Lucy's thoughts on the other characters?
Ooh, this is an interesting one. Hopefully everyone's watching so they
I think we got a few
they get
people
some
watching.
insight. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with Astrid's character Emeth. So I don't know if everyone knows, but I've been writing like poetry for all these different encounters that Lucy's been having. It's also building like his character as we speak every time we finish the session. And so with Emmett's character Astrid, he didn't really.
Astrid's character Emma.
Oh yeah, sorry. Reverse. Yes. Yeah. So to be honest, Lucy didn't really take any interest in her until he saw her back tattoo. Because Lucy's seen people like that before, you know, femme fatales. I'm sure he's had his charms put on many of them, and so he never really thought anything of her until that back tattoo. And so now that he's seen it, he wrote that poem, and he's definitely interested to learn more. Because I think she kind of subverted his original expectations of just being a femme fatale. He thinks there's something more behind it.
Interesting. Alrighty, moving down the list, I guess.
Yeah. So the next person I'll talk about is Aoife. So Lucy might be a hard ass sometimes, and he might joke around a little bit, but I don't think he has anything but adoration for Aoife. Aoife never did anything wrong to him, and he thinks that she's just like a cute puffball, despite being a goblin, maybe. Yeah, I think Lucy has nothing but adoration for Aoife, especially probably even more so now that she did quite a feat in this past session.
Yeah, that little goblin girl absolutely destroyed that tree. I think I tallied up the damage afterwards, and I think she dealt by herself over, I think it was over 60, 70 points of damage just by herself onto the tree.
Oh my god. Yeah, it would have been a much harder fight without Aoife there. Yeah. So Aoife, yeah, definitely a source of adoration for Lucy. But I would also say that it might not always be that way. Because Lucy's trust has been betrayed before, so he's not taking anything for granted. So he's still wary of her, but nothing but adoration so far.
Interesting.
And then so moving on to let's go ahead with Dante. Yeah. So yeah, Lucy loves teasing Dante. He often tries to get him to hit on other characters, tries to put him in all these different situations. But it comes out of a point of love, right? So he's not doing it to be mean to Dante, but he wants to include Dante in all these things. Especially when he goes out to do his little poetry readings, he always tries to get Dante involved. And for me, it's a big part of Lucy, because Lucy's not really big into powerful magic wielders, just because of some stuff that might have happened in his past. So he normally wouldn't like them, but I think it's because Dante is such a how do I put this? He's such a lovable character, and Lucy hasn't found any fault with him so far. That Lucy just wants to make a friend. I think in Dante is how I'd say it.
He's such a soft boy.
Exactly.
Like, obviously, with all of the characters made so far, I feel like the most interesting, because usually when you choose a certain race or class, usually there's some that go together better than others. Humans can play just about anything, but other than humans, there are certain dynamics that are usually chosen by players. And I've been playing a long time. I've never seen a halfling warlock. It's definitely an interesting choice, and I'm interested to see where that goes in the future.
Yeah, and I would say, like Aoife, Lucy is definitely still, he's not fully trusting of Dante, but there's always that little part of him who's scared of what he can do. Yeah, Dante's been doing a lot of damage as well.
Yeah.
I think he's finished off the last two enemies of the previous session, so yeah. It'll be interesting to see how everyone develops and really gets to know their characters, which Lucy has definitely been trying to do. Especially taking, Emeth, giving her that poem, Dante, having him involved in all that poetry. In his own way, Lucy's kind of testing everyone to see what they're really made of. And so that leaves us with Lucy's rival / lover.
This is probably one of my favorite dynamics of the entire group. This next character, and not gonna lie, it's left a lot of room open for me as a DM to kind of do some stuff in the background and kind of try and figure out some stuff. I'm really excited to see how they develop as a dynamic duo. Should say.
Yeah, so with Pastel's character, Matif, it definitely all started with their first meeting, right? So Lucy comes into the bar, he makes a big scene, and then right away Matif just goes, "I don't like your words." And so that's probably where it all started, where Lucy's like, "Who the hell is this guy trying to tell me what to do?" Yeah, so it definitely started from there. And like Matif's character it's a very strong character. She calls it like an asshole character, but I think he's just, very, very strong in like his beliefs. But the thing is, Lucy is like the same way, and Lucy isn't afraid to fight back. So that's why there's all this tension where they're always picking on each other. Lucy is always teasing them. And then in the latest episode, when Lucy pointed out the couple that was doing their thing in the little inn, and Lucy was testing Matif during that point too, asking if Matif's ever had anyone that he loves. And so once again, Lucy's trying to see what people are made of, because kind of going back to it, Lucy, with his background, he definitely values loyalty, and he wants to make sure that he knows who he's hanging around with. So that's definitely a big part of it. And like you were saying, I'm also very interested to see how this duo will develop, to see whether they kind of start to understand each other and kind of accept each other and work together, or if they're kind of the type to say, you have your beliefs, I have my beliefs, Um, we might not understand each other, but we still have to work together.
Yeah.
Or it could even develop into just, a spiteful relationship where they just don't get along at all.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see that.
And I feel like I've said before, like, I won't give anything away, obviously, with what I have planned moving forward. But
Hmm.
I am building up for something that I think, in particular, will challenge Matif and Lucy. Not so much on a like, oh, there's a monster kind of level, but on a really personal kind of belief level of what do we do here? Like, I think it's going to cause either a really large rift or like a lot of healing. And I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm really really interested to see how it works out.
Should I be bringing tissue for that session? Should I be ready to cry?
Maybe. I have done that to players in the past, so I wouldn't
Oh man.
say no to it.
Oh man. Now I'm really excited.
Yeah, I can't even count on my hands the amount of times I've made just Astrid cry in my home games.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And yeah, Lucy is definitely looking forward to it.
Alrighty, well, are there any places that Lucy has heard about that he would like to investigate or visit?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of your question?
Are there any places that Lucy has heard about that he would like to investigate or visit?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any place that Lucy specifically wants to go to. His main kind of goal is to just kind of raise his influence and fame and just become known everywhere. But I think that there would be some places that he'd have some investments in where he might feel are a little bit more valuable to go to. He's definitely interested in, I would say, the dwarves at least, considering how big of a force they are in this world. And I'm sure he's definitely interested in gaining some of their favor. Yeah.
The dwarves in Ioruvian are an interesting bunch. There's two main groups. There's the southern dwarves, which are your main, red bearded kind of dwarves, and then your Duragar up to the north. But they're an interesting bunch, and I think I'd be really interested to see how how Lucy interacts with them. I think that would be a really interesting sort of dynamic. I just think that would be really, really interesting to see how that would go.
Yeah, like Lucy, he's just a farm boy, so he's not the smartest cookie in the bunch, but he has his beliefs. He's very strong in his beliefs, and like he might act like he knows a lot, but he really doesn't. That's just his confidence going forward. So I'm sure there will be points where his expectations are shattered, and he'll either grow from it or he'll succumb to it and lead him down one or another path, basically. So yeah, I'm also really excited for that. Some other places that he might be interested in. He's definitely a big fan of this steampunk world. He sees the potential in the growing technology, and so he's definitely going to be seeking some upgrades for his weapons and his prosthetic arm, possibly in the near future, wherever that may be.
I think it's definitely going to be really interesting because obviously I feel like this first arc is very, very much centered in I forget what I've named it, but the Markovia Gokbar Desert region. So I feel like it's going to be really interesting once all of this somewhat resolves to see where the group goes. All right, where to next? Whether they stay in the region and do other stuff, or whether they move further west to all of the other nations, will be a very interesting kind of. Be very interesting.
I think Lucy would definitely like to travel outside of that area. He's definitely looking to his pirate friends to maybe facilitate that. Yeah.
Cool.
Lucy wants to be bigger than his boots.
Bigger than his little farm boy roots.
Yes.
All right. Well, that kind of leads into my next question. What are Lucy's thoughts on of Xandros?
Mhm. Yeah. So as we probably already know, Lucy's not a big fan of these big powerful figures. And I would say that Xandros is definitely ringing a lot of alarms in his head. Um, I think especially when he saw that it's not a chapel, but that huge room with the mural of Xandros on the wall.
Mm,
I think that's definitely where Lucy was like, "Damn, this man has got way too much power."
mm,
And because he's wary of that, and he hasn't pointed it out really to the group yet, but he sees how much power Xandros has. He knows that probably with like the snap of the finger, Lucy and his crew could end up dead.
mm.
So he's definitely aware of that, and he's definitely got some things planned for Xandros. And you being the DM, I won't spoil you either. But
Please don't. Feel free to throw any curveball you want at me.
yes,
I
he's definitely got his own things for Xandros.
Xandros is an interesting character, and I don't want to. I'm not going to say anything about him. That's stuff to come out in game.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it very. What's the word? I find it very interesting that you were one of the people to pick that up, to pick,
Mm-hmm.
or to pick up kind of vibes that I wasn't necessarily aiming for, but stuff that. Yeah, I don't want to give it away too much, but it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting what you as a player and what Lucy as a character has kind of picked up on so far.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was when we had first started the sessions, Lucy kind of had like this idea of, hey, here's this figure that might be able to help me in my quest, and it started from that ally kind of vision, but then as he started going on and he started noticing all these things, he's definitely started to become a lot more wary of the actual presence of Xandros.
Mm.
He's realizing that he's a much bigger figure than he anticipated, so that goes along with just Lucy's background and just being wary of people who might be a little bit too powerful.
It's like walking into a bank and like you're expecting to talk to just a bank teller, and then the CEO walks out, and
Exactly,
it's like, oh
exactly.
shit, okay, it's one of those kinds of meetings.
Yeah. Especially since like one of the first meetings that we had in the sessions was just in like a small little inn.
Mm.
But then, yeah, and one of the next times we see him is in this huge area where he just owns everything.
Mm. Cool. And one of the last ones, I know the answer to this, but this is more for the viewers and whatnot. Why did you take a level into fighter when you leveled up?
Yeah, so there are two main reasons. So the first reason is I know you're a multi-classer yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember you and I talking. You said that there's a lot to be gained from multi-classing, and so I feel like with the way that Lucy's going now, especially he likes to kind of support in the beginning, where he'll like throw some vicious mockeries and some spells, but then after that he'll usually jump in and try to slash up some mushrooms and whatnot. Yeah, so that's kind of the direction that I wanted to go in. Especially with fighter, he can be a little bit more in their face. He can be a little bit more tanky, especially with all the new options that he's gotten with now being able to use a shield.
Mm.
So that's kind of like the practical aspect of it, where he can do a little bit more of what he wants to do. And then the second aspect of it is a little bit more lore related, where Lucy's origins as a soldier are kind of coming back to him. He stepped away from it for a bit, becoming a bard, learning the power of the pen and how influential celebrities and memes could be. But yeah, but at his heart, he was a soldier from a young age. So all of that, he's probably coming to terms with it and doesn't mind getting back in the thick of things.
One of the having played D&D a long time, just about every character you could possibly make can gain something from 3 levels of fighter. 3 levels of fighter is probably like 3 or 5 levels of fighter is probably like the best dip into another class you can make. Got a lot of benefits to have with it, and I feel like, especially with knowing Lucy's backstory, I think it has a lot of positive gains, obviously near and further on in the future.
Yeah, I was definitely looking into like what I could gain from fighter in the later levels, and I was looking at the subclasses, and a couple caught my eye, but especially the Echo Knight one, where you get to craft that echo. And I was just thinking of all these obviously the combat aspects, where how useful that can be, but I was also looking at it from the roleplay perspective on what Lucy could do with like a image, and like using that in his grand performances just to impress people. And yeah, I think that'll be something to look forward to, especially once everyone gets like higher levels and they could do crazier things.
Because I have a feeling that pretty much, unless something crazy happens, I think Aoife and Matif will probably keeping on with their classes. Multi-classing out of Cleric is probably the best straight up class in Dungeons and Dragons. Anything it can do, other classes can do, but it can do, like, Clerics can do better. They can heal. They can cast damage spells. They can get up into the thick of it. Most of them can, have heavy armor and shields. So they're kind of a jack of all trades, master of all. So I feel like she probably won't multi-class out of Cleric. Matif probably won't leave Sorcerer. Sorcerers don't gain much by multi-classing out. Maybe Warlock, but that would have to be very story specific to kind of happen on that front. I think you Emeth, and perhaps Dante could have some multi-classing potential, but you and Emeth multi-classing into fighter is probably the most understandable. Bards are great. 20 levels of bards, not so much. They need a little bit of help earlier on if they can get it. And rogues, while going to 20th level in rogue is great, a couple levels of fighter can really help them beef out just a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, I'm not that experienced with D&D, so maybe my optimization isn't the greatest, but yeah, I'm attacking it definitely more from a lore perspective, more than an optimization perspective.
Yeah, I definitely think that you going into fighter was a good move, honestly. I didn't see it coming. I just expected you to keep going bard, but hearing you say I want to dip fighter, I was like, I can respect that. That's a good dip. Alrighty, and finally, before we finish off, touching on what you said before about your poem about Emeth, care to elaborate on why he crafted the poem specifically?
Yes. So let me just bring it up real quick, just so I can give you some more details. So yeah, I haven't told anyone, but so Lucy carries around this book of his poems, and the book is titled Poetic Justice, and it has a little over 10 poems so far. A lot of them most people haven't seen yet. But that's where he just keeps poems and records all of his adventures and all of his encounters. So the first line is, "A fox lies concealed by mystery." And so, going back to the duality thing, Lucy loves double meanings. And so, yeah, so for this poem is about the back tattoo of Emeth of the fox. So just the first line, "A fox lies," has two meanings. So the first one being the lying of like lying down on a bed, kind of giving off that seductive aura. But there's also another meaning for lying in terms of falsehoods.
Mm.
So that kind of goes to his thinking that there's definitely something more than what she's giving off. Like she might be this femme fatale who's not afraid of stripping off all of her clothes and just walking around naked. Yeah, he definitely thinks there's something more than that.
Mm.
Yeah, so both that seductive nature and that maybe false nature both conceal her in mystery. And the next line, "Bloody fangs behind striking crimson lips." That's just basically going back to that femme fatale side, where she might have those seductive lips, but there's definitely some sharp teeth behind that. And then the third line, "Hypnotizing curves and deceptive tales mislead." That's also another double entendre, where tales also meaning Emeth's behind, and then tales in terms of like stories. So another double meaning there. And sorry for nerding out in the poetry here, guys, but
No,
that's
it's
just
perfect.
kind of my thing. Yeah, and then an alluring guise capable of seducing even death. Yeah. So undress my fox goddess and show me your secrets. So there's definitely a lot of interest in Emmett's character, because he's definitely into duality and mystery, and Lucy's getting those vibes from her. So that's why he's taken so much interest in that back tattoo.
Awesome. Well, I think that's where we'll wrap up our first episode of The Other Side. We're going to keep the episodes relatively short, just so we can let people get back to their days and whatnot and have a little bit of an interview. But thank you very much, Yume, for joining me.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. This was so interesting to go to. I'm glad I got to talk about Lucy and kind of like the inspiration that I got from him. Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me, and I really look forward to seeing all the other members' interviews and see what they think of Lucy and all that.
So just before we go, if you want to plug yourself, where can we find you, Yume?
Yes, so you can find me at my YouTube channel under the same name. I do poetry there, and I also have started doing some philosophy and psychology. The latest one was on finding meaning in your life. So if that kind of stuff interests you, then go ahead and check out my YouTube channel.
Awesome. And I am your dungeon master, your dice, your mini maker. I'm in everything. I'm Merlin the Magister. Getting a bit tongue-tied with that. You can find me at Twitch under the same name, Merlin the Magister, as well as on Twitter. And if you want to keep up to date with all of our projects, please follow us on Twitter. That's where you'll get the most up-to-date information about what projects we're doing, as well as when we're streaming. So please follow us there. And thank you very much for watching.
Yeah, thank you very much. See you later, Space Cowboy.
Peace out.